This is the second day of the 3Cs Stock Exchanges Conference in Warsaw. And I have my guest is Mr. Marius Dan, who is the Deputy CEO of Fondul Proprietatea, which is a closed-end Romanian investment fund. And actually, this is a very interesting and I think quite a unique entity in Central Eastern Europe. So I would like to start with you explaining what is Fondul Proprietatea, what is your investment policy, how did it came about?
Sure. Thank you very much for the invite. It's great to be in Warsaw today. It's my first travel after the pandemic started, and I want to congratulate the Warsaw Stock Exchange as well for the celebrations for the 30 years. Fondul Proprietatea is a closed-end fund which is listed both in Bucharest and in London. It's an entity that was created by the Romanian government back in 2005 as a way to compensate Romanian individuals that had their properties confiscated by the communist regime. And because some of the properties couldn't be returned in kind, and the government didn't have cash to pay for these compensation claims, but they had a lot of state-owned companies, both minority and majority stakes. They decided to create this vehicle, inject the stakes from the government's ownership into this fund. It was valued initially at $4 billion. And we, as Franklin Templeton, started managing it in September 2010. We just celebrated our 11th anniversary since we've been managing the fund. Our mandate has been extended by shareholders to manage it. And you're absolutely right. It is a very unique vehicle because of its history, but it's an incredibly successful example of how an entity like this can help accelerate the development of the local capital market, because one of the things that we did with the creation of Fondul, because it was a liquid closed-end fund, we started promoting the Romanian Stock Exchange, Fondul, and the portfolio companies to a broad base of investors. So we've attracted into the fund's shares, we've attracted about $1.5 billion in investments from foreign institutional investors from outside of Romania, which to date is the single largest FDI in the last 30 years.
So is that your capital for investment? It doesn't only come from those initial shareholders who got the shares from the government as a way to compensate for the lost property, but you also sell shares to new investors, and then you invest it in new companies, not only those that were privatized in 2005.
Yeah, so a lot of those initial Romanians that received shares as compensation are still shareholders of the fund, which and we thank them for their trust. We've been able to generate great returns because the stock price of the fund is up around 500% since we listed it on the stock exchange 10 years ago. We have not made any new investments in the last 8-9 years because our primary focus has been to help make the companies, the state-owned companies, more efficient, more profitable, to help them bring them on the market. We've had various examples of listings both on the Bucharest Stock Exchange and in London. And of course, we still have a few large assets that we think would be great to be brought to the market, including Hidroelectrica, which is the largest power producer in Romania. And then we can engage with our shareholders to change the investment strategy, because right now we're solely focused on restructuring these companies, making them more profitable, getting the dividends, and then distributing those dividends to our shareholders.
So in your portfolio, there are both companies which are listed and unlisted companies, like private companies, that you are trying to list?
Yes. Most of the portfolio right now is unlisted companies because of Hidroelectrica. So about 75% of the portfolio is in private companies, which hopefully will come to the market. Hidroelectrica, we're going to IPO next year. And then we have, for instance, the salt mines, which is a natural monopoly. It's a state-owned company. We'll bring that to the market so that our portfolio will shift from private companies to publicly listed entities, because we think there's a huge value unlocking potential when we bring these companies to the market compared to the value at which we carry them in the fund right now.
That will actually be a very interesting construction, because one investor will be able to hold both the shares of your portfolio companies and the shares of the Fondul.
Absolutely, and that has been the case many times for institutional investors, because initially they've invested into the shares of the fund, but then they saw some of the better performing assets in the portfolio that were also listed, and they decided to invest directly in those as well. Because the advantage of the fund is that we have a diversified portfolio, even though it's geared towards the energy sector, because that's where the state had a lot of assets back in 2005. It's still a diversified portfolio.
Could you explain how the COVID-19 pandemic influenced the Romanian capital market in general and the stock market in particular?
It had a similar impact as we've seen everywhere around the world. Back when the pandemic started, there was panic selling, and then there was a very swift recovery in line with Warsaw and the regional markets, as well as the other global stock exchanges. The Romanian market performed very well. It's trading at record highs. Our share price as well is at a record high, so we're a beneficiary of that. But some of the businesses have done fantastically well during the pandemic. Some of them have been hit, and we have both in our portfolio, because we own the largest energy company, which is Hidroelectrica, which has benefited from what we're seeing now, increases in the energy prices, and we have the Bucharest airport, which has suffered because of the pandemic and traffic, at the worst, when all the countries were in lockdown, traffic had gone down by 90%. We've seen a significant recovery on the back of the higher vaccination rate, people getting more comfortable. People have actually have started to learn how to live with the virus, and that's also showing in the airport traffic numbers. So, and the other side is the fact that more companies have decided to come on the stock exchange because of the valuations and the and the market performance that they've seen. It's you can get very good multiples by bringing the company, your company, on the stock exchange, and 5 or 6 years ago that was a different story.
Well, what about the demand side of the market? One global trend caused by the pandemic was an increase in activity of retail investors. Have you also experienced this in Romania?
Yes, not to the extent that we're seeing in the States, not to the extent that we're seeing in other countries, but I'm very happy to say that more retail investors are looking at investing directly in the stock exchange. So the number of retail accounts has gone up, especially in the last 12 months. And then what we're also seeing, more Romanians are investing in mutual funds as well. And the mutual fund history is seeing record high assets. We also have pension funds in Romania that have about $2 billion of inflows every year, and that's helped create a really strong ecosystem, together with attracting foreign institutional investors into the country. This has all contributed to the performance that we're seeing.
We are speaking during the Three Seas Stock Exchanges conference. So the natural question is about the scope for cooperation between the stock market operators and, in general, the stock exchanges in the region. Where do you see the opportunities to cooperate?
I find that this region has tremendous potential because of the economies that we're seeing, the economic growth, as well as the population. Poland is the largest country in the region. Romania is the second largest country. So I think there's tremendous scope for cooperation, and especially at the capital markets level. I think there should be more promotion of this region to attract more institutional investors into all the stock exchanges, because there are not only some terrific companies that are listed in Warsaw, in Bucharest, in Prague, but there are some fantastic potential companies that should come to the market. What I would really like to see is more events like this that are being done to promote the local capital markets, to promote the companies in order to bring some of that capital that's circulating around the world to bringing it into our region.
What do you think about the idea of creating a Central Eastern European index, which would somehow, maybe it would serve as a benchmark for passive investment fund? Do you find this a good idea?
I think yes, that's a very good idea, because it's very important to allow institutional investors to get access to a diversified pool of companies, and each country has their own local index, but to have a regional index makes it a very attractive proposition. There's a lot of passive money, and there's a lot of inflows in passive money and in passive products. It would be a missed opportunity not to try to emphasize, what such a diversified index could offer to institutional investors, both retail, right? Because that can also be a way to spur more retail investments into such an index, as well as institutional money.
Our guest was Mr. Marius Dan, who is the Deputy CEO of Fondul Proprietatea, a Romanian investment fund. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.